Before music was written, before songs had names, humans were already carving sound out of bone, wood, and wind. These were the first voices of our ancestors, soft, fragile, and full of wonder. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll hear how these ancient sounds still echo in the music we love today. Make sure to subscribe because I bring you stories that travel across centuries and touch the quiet origins of our world. The first breath of sound did not begin as music. It began as curiosity, as a moment of quiet wonder in a world that was anything but quiet. Thousands of years ago, early humans lived in landscapes filled with wind, cracking branches, flowing water, and the distant rumble of animals. Every day was full of noise, yet none of it was shaped with intention. None of it belonged to them in the way that a melody would one day belong to a human heart. That first moment of discovery likely happened by accident. A hollow bone left behind by a bird or animal, the kind that nature cleans out over time, becoming a light and delicate tube. Someone, perhaps while playing, perhaps while experimenting with the hunter's leftover materials, put it to their lips and blew. The air inside vibrated, and a sound that had never existed before trembled into the world. It must have startled them at first. This was unlike the wind through trees or the calls of wolves. It was a tone, thin and airy, yet controlled. It responded to their breath. It belonged to them. That discovery, small and almost insignificant in appearance, changed the entire course of human expression. What they held was not a tool for hunting or survival. It was something that stirred the air in a different way, something that could stir emotions. Over time, our ancestors learned that the length of the bone, the thickness of its walls, the angle of the blowing, and even small holes carved into it would shape the sound. They did not know the science behind vibrations or acoustics. They did not need to. They learned by listening, by feeling, by trying again and again. Perhaps a child broke the end of a bone flute and discovered that a shorter tube created a higher pitch. Perhaps someone carved a hole by accident and found that covering and uncovering it produced different sounds, as if the instrument were speaking in syllables of its own. Bit by bit, these discoveries led to intentional design. These simple bone flutes became some of the earliest musical instruments humans ever made, long before metal, long before writing, long before civilization rose in stone. The people who made these instruments were not thinking of music as we think of it today. They did not consider scales, notes, or performance. Instead, they were awakening to a new form of communication, one that reached beyond words and gestures. Imagine a small group gathered around a fire. The night is cold. Flames crackle, sparks drift upward, and the darkness beyond the circle is filled with unknown eyes. Someone lifts a hollow bone to their lips. A soft, wavering tone drifts through the air, gently at first, then with growing confidence. The others listen, perhaps confused, maybe delighted, maybe mesmerized. For the first time, a human being is shaping sound not to warn, not to command, not to mimic nature, but to express something invisible, something internal. These early flutes were fragile things. Made from bird bones, mammal bones, or reeds, they could break easily. But their fragility made them precious. They were likely passed down, repaired, decorated, cherished. Some may have been used only during certain rituals, moments when tribes sought connection with the unseen forces around them. Others were played casually, a quiet pastime during long evenings when tasks were finished, and the world momentarily felt safe. Whatever the purpose, these instruments began to bind people together in a way that had never happened before. Stories could be told with sound. Emotions could be expressed without speech. The first breath of music was not loud. It was not grand. It was intimate. As generations passed, the understanding of these sounds deepened. The human voice, which had always been capable of singing, now had a partner, an external object that could hold notes longer, produce tones higher or lower than the voice could reach, and create textures no throat could replicate. People began to experiment further. They carved more holes. They shaped the ends differently. They learned how to regulate breath, harder to make the sound sharp, softer to make it gentle. Their ears grew more sensitive. They noticed the difference between a warm tone produced by a wide tube and a thin, cold tone produced by a narrow one. They discovered that different bones created different voices, almost like different personalities. The flute became not just an instrument, but an extension of the maker's own imagination. Some researchers today believe that these early instruments were used in rituals to call spirits, communicate with ancestors, or accompany dances performed during special ceremonies. The sound of a bone flute carries far in the open air, but it also has an eerie, almost otherworldly quality. To ancient people who saw the world through myth and mystery, these sounds were not mere entertainment. They were signs that the world was alive in ways they did not fully understand. But beyond ritual, music served deeper roles. It soothed children, it calmed fears. It gave rhythm to work and meaning to rest. Imagine someone sitting near a river, playing a slow, wandering melody while others cleaned animal skins or shaped spears. The music did not disrupt the labor, it accompanied it, turning repetitive tasks into moments of quiet unity. For early humans who lived with constant uncertainty, such moments were rare and cherished. As humans migrated across continents, the flute traveled with them. Each region shaped its own sound. In colder regions, people carved flutes from the bones of birds like swans or geese. In warmer climates, reeds and bamboo served the same purpose. Some flutes were short and shrill, others were long and deep. No two sounded exactly alike. These variations were not just technical, they reflected the land itself, the animals that lived there, and the materials available. The deeper meaning behind these instruments also grew. People began to recognize that sound had power. Not just emotional power, but symbolic and spiritual significance. Many early cultures believed that breath itself was a form of life. To breathe into an instrument and produce sound was to give it part of one's own spirit. It was as if the instrument became alive for a moment, speaking in a voice shaped by human intention, but filled with something deeper. This belief transformed the act of playing into something sacred. A flute player might be seen as a bridge between the human world and the natural world, a person capable of coaxing hidden messages out of silent objects. In some cultures, these players were revered. In others, they were feared, because the ability to summon sound from nothing seemed like magic. As time passed, people learned to play in groups. What began as a solo discovery became a shared activity. Several flute players could create harmonies, though they would not have used that word. They simply recognized that certain tones blended well, while others clashed. They learned to alternate, taking turns to create patterns. These early attempts at musical structure laid the foundation for rhythms, melodies, and eventually, the entire language of music. But even as music grew more complex, the flute remained a symbol of simplicity, intimacy, and the human connection to breath. It was lightweight, easy to carry, and could be played anywhere. On the top of a hill, beside a river, deep within a forest, or inside a dark cave lit only by fire. Some early humans painted instruments on cave walls, suggesting that they recognized the importance of these creations not just in daily life, but in their identity as a people. The earliest known flutes, discovered in places like the Swabian Jura region of Germany, date back more than 40,000 years. This means that music is older than many of the tools we consider essential to early human survival. Music was not an afterthought. It was part of our evolution. The ability to create and appreciate sound likely strengthened bonds within groups, making cooperation easier and more natural. Community that made music together was a community that trusted each other. The emotional power of these early flutes cannot be overstated. When a single note drifted through the air, it could evoke memories, visions, or emotions in ways that ordinary sounds could not. Perhaps a flute melody reminded someone of a loved one who had passed away. Perhaps it brought comfort during times of hunger or danger. Perhaps it simply added beauty to a harsh world. Whatever the experience, the impact was profound. Over centuries, as humans developed agriculture, settled into villages, and built early societies, the flute and its descendants continued to evolve. New materials appeared: clay, ivory, wood shaped with more precision. But even as instruments became more refined, the heart of the flute remained the same: a hollow tube brought to life by human breath. Breath is the first and last act of life. It is involuntary yet deeply personal. To use breath to create sound is to share a piece of oneself with others. That is why the earliest musical instruments, though simple, carried such weight. They were not merely objects. They were companions to human emotion, mirrors of the inner world. The discovery that hollow bones could sing changed more than music. It changed culture, communication, and the human spirit. It taught people that beauty could be created, not just found. It revealed that expression could go beyond survival. It showed that humans were capable of shaping the world not just with their hands, but with their imagination. Today, even though modern instruments are crafted with extraordinary precision, the essence of that first breath remains unchanged. When a musician lifts a flute, whether made of metal, bamboo, wood, or bone, and exhales into it, they are participating in one of the oldest rituals of human creativity. They are echoing a sound that drifted through ancient forests, resonated in caves, and accompanied countless generations through their joys and sorrows. And though the world has changed, the meaning of that sound has not. It still carries emotion. It still connects. It still transforms silence into something sacred. That is the soft history of the first breath of sound, a quiet moment of curiosity that became a universal language, a fragile beginning that grew into the heartbeat of human expression. It reminds us that sometimes the most delicate discoveries shape the deepest parts of who we are. Even now, thousands of years later, when a simple melody floats into the air, it is hard not to feel that ancient wonder stirring within us once more. As those early flutes continued to shape human life, their presence also began influencing how communities understood time. Before clocks, before measured hours or days recorded on calendars, sound helped people anchor themselves in the rhythms of existence. A melody played at dusk could signal that the day's work was ending. A series of low notes played before sunrise could gently wake a sleeping group. Music slowly became a language that marked transitions, from danger to calm, from work to rest, from silence to celebration. These transitions mattered deeply to people whose lives were guided not by machines or written schedules, but by the fragile balance between nature and survival. Imagine a small group traveling across open plains. They set up temporary shelters, gather around a fire, and share the food they hunted that day. As night settles in, someone quietly plays a flute. The sound floats above the grass, weaving through the cracks of the night wind. The firelight flickers on the faces of those gathered, their breathing slows, their eyes grow calm. In that moment, the sound becomes a promise that even in the vastness of the world, there is connection, there is unity, and there is something that belongs to them alone. This emotional reassurance was not trivial. It strengthened bonds, nurtured trust, and eased the burdens of a harsh life. The act of creating sound also deepened human creativity in other ways. Once early humans learned how to shape bone or wood to make music, they began noticing patterns in the world around them. They observed how the wind whistled through cracks in the rocks, how water dripped rhythmically from cave ceilings, how certain stones produced different sounds when struck. Music sharpened their awareness. It made them listen more closely. It taught them that the world was full of hidden possibilities. This shift in perception likely played a role in the development of other technologies: better tools, better shelters, more complex art. The flute did not just create sound, it created curiosity. As generations passed, playing the flute became a skill that some individuals mastered more than others. These were the early musicians, people whose sensitivity to sound allowed them to explore melodies that others had not yet imagined. Their role in society may have been subtle, but it was powerful. A skilled flute player could comfort a grieving mother, entertain restless children, inspire courage before a dangerous hunt. or encourage unity during long migrations. In the absence of written language, music carried emotional messages more precise than words. A rising melody could inspire hope. A slow, repeating pattern could soothe the mind after a long day. These musicians became, in a sense, storytellers of the soul. The materials used to make these early flutes also held meaning. Bones of certain animals were considered sacred, tied to myths or spiritual beliefs. To carve a flute from the bone of a swan might symbolize grace. To use the bone of a predator might invoke strength. Even if the symbolism varied between groups, the idea that instruments carried spiritual weight was widespread. Before religions took formal shape, before temples or priests, the flute was already a vessel of meaning. When a person played it, they were participating in something ancient and mysterious, something that felt larger than themselves. Over time, certain melodies may have become associated with specific traditions. A melody for mourning, a melody for celebration. A melody for long journeys, repeated softly to keep fear at bay. These repeated patterns, passed down from elders to children, served as early cultural memory. When a child learned to play a melody taught by a grandparent, they were not just learning notes. They were inheriting history wrapped in sound. This ability to carry emotion and memory across generations gave the flute a place of honor in human development. The communal aspect of music also evolved. As groups grew larger, gatherings became more frequent. Special occasions, the return of a hunting party, the birth of a child, a successful migration to a new region, were marked with sound. Several flute players might join together, creating layers of tones that filled the night air with something wondrous. The blending of multiple instruments may have been one of humanity's earliest experiences of harmony, even if they had no word for it. The emotional effect of such gatherings cannot be overstated. People felt united not just through physical presence, but through shared sound that moved through all of them at once. Music became a reminder that they were part of something larger than individual survival. As different regions developed their own styles of flute making, sound became a marker of identity. A group living near rivers might create softer, reed-based instruments. A mountain group might carve sharp-toned flutes from hollow bird bones found in higher altitudes. Over time, these regional differences became part of cultural uniqueness. Sound was not just expression, it was identity. A melody could reveal where someone was from, what stories shaped their ancestors, what environments shaped their lifestyle. This diversity enriched the human story long before borders or written languages existed. The mastery of breath also shaped physical development. Playing a flute required control, steady inhalation and exhalation, awareness of lung capacity, and sensitivity to airflow. Over time, individuals who played regularly developed stronger respiratory systems and better control over their voices. Some researchers believe that this may have indirectly influenced early speech development. Music and language grew together, each enriching the other. A community that learned to shape sound creatively may have found it easier to develop expressive speech patterns, creating a feedback loop of increasing sophistication. Even as societies evolved, the earliest flutes never fully disappeared. Their sound remained tied to the primal parts of the human mind. Thousands of years later, when more complex instruments were invented, the flute still carried the soft, ancient voice that had once echoed in forests and caves. The emotions it awakened were old, familiar, and deeply rooted in human consciousness. A modern flute player today still uses breath to animate a hollow tube, just as a person did tens of thousands of years ago. The technique may be refined, the materials more polished, but the essence is identical. This continuity stretches across human history like a thin thread of sound, fragile yet unbroken. There is something timeless in that simplicity. A flute does not require strength, wealth, or complex tools to exist. It requires nothing but breath. And from breath, it gives back emotion. That exchange, invisible, Delicate, profound is one of the earliest collaborations between human intention and the natural world. When we listen to a flute today, whether in a recording, a concert hall, or a quiet room, we are hearing the echo of someone who once looked at a hollow bone and wondered what voice it carried. That moment of wonder changed everything. Even in our modern world, surrounded by machines, noise, technology, and constant movement, the soft sound of a simple flute can quiet the mind. It can pull us back to the edge of a firelit cave, where shadows flicker and stars fill the sky. It can remind us that beneath all the progress and complexity, humans remain the same creatures who once breathed gently into fragile bone and discovered a new kind of magic. The first breath of sound still lies within us, waiting to be heard whenever silence opens enough space for it to return. The ancient drum carried through the forests, reminding early communities that their heartbeat and the land's heartbeat were one, and as people gathered around flickering firelight, they felt stories rise and settle with every timeless tone that the pulse offered to the night. The earthen rhythm carried through the deserts, reminding early communities that their heartbeat and the land's heartbeat were one. And as people gathered around flickering firelight, they felt stories rise and settle with every deep tone that the voice offered to the night. The vast memory carried through the mountains, reminding early communities that their heartbeat and the land's heartbeat were one. And as people gathered around flickering firelight, they felt stories rise and settle with every ancient tone that the beat offered to the night. The primordial echo carried through the valleys, reminding early communities that their heartbeat and the land's heartbeat were one, and as people gathered around flickering firelight, they felt stories rise and settle with every resonant tone that the echo offered to the night. The soft voice carried through the plains, reminding early communities that their heartbeat and the land's heartbeat were one, and as people gathered around flickering firelight, they felt stories rise and settle with every vast tone that the rhythm offered to the night. The resonant bond carried through the riversides, reminding early communities that their heartbeat and the land's heartbeat were one, and as people gathered around flickering firelight, they felt stories rise and settle with every echoing tone that the drum offered to the night. The echoing drum carried through the coastlines, reminding early communities that their heartbeat and the land's heartbeat were one, and as people gathered around flickering firelight, they felt stories rise and settle with every primordial tone that the pulse offered to the night. In the earliest moments of human creativity, before written language, before metal tools, and long before the idea of civilizations took root, there was rhythm. Rhythm emerged not as entertainment, but as a natural echo of the world itself. The thunder rolling across valleys, the steady crash of ocean waves, the rustle of animals moving through grass, and the strong, persistent pulse of the human heart. Early humans, curious observers of their environment, learned to imitate these patterns using whatever materials the earth offered. Stones, sticks, logs, bones, each object became a potential instrument, but none resonated with the same transformational power as the drum. Something in the deep, vibrating thump awakened a response that felt older than memory itself, as though the earth and the human body were speaking to each other in a shared, ancient language. It was in this exchange that the earliest drums were born from earth and fire, from hide and wood, from necessity and wonder. When ancient hands first stretched animal hide across a wooden frame and secured it with sinew, they created more than an object. They created a voice. This voice could whisper, speak, roar, or thunder, depending on how it was struck. It could convey mood, urgency, celebration, or mourning. Unlike spoken language, which could be misunderstood or limited by dialect, the drum's language was universal. A single pattern could carry across great distances, calling communities together long before the invention of written communication. As villages grew into early settlements, these drums became central to gathering, to ritual, to storytelling. They were played beside fire pits under open skies or in sheltered caves where echoes amplified their spiritual weight. The drum was not just an invention, it was a discovery of something humans had always carried within themselves, a desire to shape sound into meaning. As time passed, the role of drums expanded. They became central to rituals of life and death. They marked the beginning of harvest seasons, the arrival of warriors returning from distant journeys, the birth of children, and the transitions of elders into the world of spirits. In some cultures, the drum was believed to be alive, its heartbeat an extension of the earth's own breathing. To play it was not merely to create sound, but to awaken its spirit, to communicate with forces larger than oneself. And so, ceremonies that relied on drumming were often performed with great reverence. The instrument was treated as a companion, a guardian, and sometimes a guide into altered states of consciousness. The steady, repetitive patterns could lull dancers and singers into trances, allowing them to feel connected to ancestors or to energies unseen. That deep sense of unity, forged through shared rhythm, echoed through countless generations and shaped the course of human expression. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the way rhythm shapes memory and community, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense how ancient people understood the drum as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the connection between heartbeat, breath, and repeating patterns, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the role of sound in guiding early societies, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the sense of belonging created through shared rhythm, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the mysterious power of vibration to calm or awaken human emotion, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the way firelight and drumming often merge during night rituals, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense how repetition allowed early humans to enter trance-like states, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the belief that drums called ancestors closer, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the idea that rhythm carried messages across unseen worlds, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the connection between heartbeat, breath, and repeating patterns, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the sense of belonging created through shared rhythm, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense how ancient people understood the drum as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the role of sound in guiding early societies, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the way rhythm shapes memory and community, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the mysterious power of vibration to calm or awaken human emotion, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the way firelight and drumming often merge during night rituals, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the belief that drums called ancestors closer, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense how repetition allowed early humans to enter trance-like states, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the idea that rhythm carried messages across unseen worlds, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the way rhythm shapes memory and community, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the role of sound in guiding early societies, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the connection between heartbeat, breath, and repeating patterns, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the mysterious power of vibration to calm or awaken human emotion, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the sense of belonging created through shared rhythm, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense how ancient people understood the drum as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the idea that rhythm carried messages across unseen worlds, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense how repetition allowed early humans to enter trance-like states, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the belief that drums called ancestors closer, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the way firelight and drumming often merged during night rituals, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the role of sound in guiding early societies, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the sense of belonging created through shared rhythm, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the connection between heartbeat, breath, and repeating patterns, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the way rhythm shapes memory and community, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the mysterious power of vibration to calm or awaken human emotion, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense how ancient people understood the drum as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the belief that drums called ancestors closer, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense how repetition allowed early humans to enter trance-like states, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. In reflecting on these ancient rhythms, one can sense the idea that rhythm carried messages across unseen worlds, revealing how deeply music has always lived within the human story and shaped our earliest experiences. Drums connect us all. In the earliest days of human history, long before cities rose and written words carried meaning, humans discovered that sound could tell stories. While drums captured rhythm and breath, and flutes captured air and song, strings offered something quieter, more intimate, and more precise. From twined plant fibers to gut strings, early string instruments were delicate constructions, often no larger than a handspan, yet capable of producing vibrations that seemed to hold entire worlds within them. These instruments were small, portable, and fragile, yet their sounds resonated deeply with those who listened. A single pluck could evoke longing, joy, sorrow, or the memory of a distant journey. People soon realized that sound could carry more than warning or ritual. It could convey personal experience, human emotion, and the stories that lived inside every heart. The first stringed instruments were simple. Early humans might have stretched fibers from plants or animal tendons over hollowed-out sticks, gourds, or small wooden frames. Each string vibrated differently, depending on tension, thickness, and length. In quiet moments by the fire, someone would pluck a string experimentally, discovering that each vibration produced a sound unlike any other. One string could hum low and steady, while another quivered and shivered in higher tones. Early humans recognized that, with careful manipulation, these strings could produce a variety of sounds, and over time, they began experimenting to create instruments capable of playing multiple notes. These discoveries, though humble, laid the foundations for an entire lineage of musical innovation. Unlike drums, which spoke to groups through volume and resonance, strings whispered. They spoke to individuals, capturing attention in subtle ways. A solitary traveler, for example, might sit beneath a tree and pluck strings to pass time during a long journey. The notes would ripple outward, creating small waves of sound that could soothe a restless mind, ease fatigue, or bring comfort. Strings were intimate companions, instruments that encouraged reflection and internal storytelling. They mirrored the experiences of the player and the listener, often leaving traces of memory that could be recalled for years afterward. Early string instruments became entwined with the rituals and narratives of daily life. A hunter might pluck gentle notes to honor an animal recently taken for food, while a family preparing a harvest might use strings to celebrate abundance and express gratitude. During the planting season, strings might accompany soft songs intended to encourage crops to grow or to celebrate the cycles of nature. These instruments, though small, had a power that transcended their size. They could communicate the subtleties of human experience, the silent moments of grief, the quiet joys, and the enduring hopes that shaped the rhythms of life. As these instruments evolved, makers discovered that the material of the string affected the story it could tell. Fibers from different plants produced different tonal qualities. Small, hollow bodies amplified the vibration in unique ways, giving instruments a voice that could carry through a room, a tent, or even open spaces during communal gatherings. Even small variations, a slightly longer string, a thinner fiber, or a small carved resonance chamber, could alter the sound profoundly. Makers became meticulous, experimenting with every detail to perfect the instrument's expressive capacity. The pursuit of subtlety became a reflection of human patience, ingenuity, and the desire to communicate more than simple sounds. The stories told through strings were not always joyful. Many were reflective, capturing migration and displacement, long journeys over rugged terrain, and the separation of families or tribes. A soft quiver and a plucked note could evoke the longing for home, while a rapid, repeating pattern could capture the urgency of a journey or the strain of toil. Children learn to recognize these patterns and associate them with memories and emotions, much as one might recognize a friend's voice, a loved one's footsteps. Music, through strings, became an unspoken record of life, passing knowledge, emotion, and history from one generation to the next. Because of their fragility, stringed instruments were often treasured possessions. A single instrument could last for years, maintained with care and repaired when necessary. Families sometimes passed them down, each generation leaving its mark in minor adjustments or embellishments. Even the act of tuning a string, a practice that could take patience and attentiveness, became a meditative ritual. Tuning required not only physical adjustment but careful listening and a sensitivity to vibration. The musician's body, breath, and attention merged with the instrument, creating a harmony that was as much about presence as it was about sound. Strings also encouraged experimentation with technique. People discovered that plucking, bowing, or striking a string produced different effects. Early bows may have been made of flexible wood with plant fibers or animal hair to rub against the string, producing continuous vibration. Hands, fingers, and simple tools expanded the expressive range of the instrument, allowing humans to convey a variety of moods and textures. In time, patterns emerged. Repeated sequences, arpeggios, harmonies, each variation telling a slightly different story. Musicians learned to anticipate the emotional response of the listener, creating intricate and nuanced performances that transcended words. Early string instruments also fostered collaboration. Unlike solitary moments of reflection, community gatherings often included multiple players, each contributing their voice to a collective story. In a small village or camp, several instruments could be played together, creating complex patterns of rhythm and melody. The interaction between strings and other early instruments, such as flutes or drums, further enriched the sonic landscape. Musicians learned to listen attentively, to respond in kind, and to create dialogue through sound. This interactive element mirrored social bonds, reinforcing the connections between individuals and the collective, and strengthening the cohesion of early communities. The narrative power of strings extended beyond human experience into the natural and spiritual realms. In many early cultures, it was believed that sound could influence the environment or communicate with unseen forces. The gentle vibrations of a string could be used to accompany prayers, to soothe restless animals, or to evoke rain or favorable winds. Some early musicians believed that certain tones resonated with the spirits of ancestors, creating a bridge between the living and those who had passed. These practices reinforced the importance of strings as more than mere instruments. They were vessels of meaning, ritual, and emotional resonance, capable of shaping the intangible aspects of human life. Strings were also deeply tied to the cycles of the seasons. Plucked notes might mark planting, growth, harvest, or migration, reflecting the intimate connection between people and the natural world. Songs and melodies, carried on vibrating strings, encoded knowledge about the environment, patterns of rainfall, the timing of migrations, or the ripening of crops. In this way, strings became tools of both culture and survival, preserving knowledge and emotion alike. To play them was to participate in the ongoing narrative of the community, blending the practical with the poetic, the observed with the imagined. Generations of musicians, children, and learners shaped these instruments over time. By listening closely and experimenting, they refined techniques, created new sounds, and expanded the expressive capabilities of strings. Every pluck and vibration carried not only the intentions of the present player, but echoes of countless ancestors who had explored the same strings. As a result, even simple melodies became layered with depth, context, and resonance, creating an enduring record of human experience. The string, though delicate, became a repository of memory, emotion, and cultural identity. The intimacy of strings also allowed humans to explore personal expression. A solo performance by an early musician could convey inner emotions in ways that words could not. The gentle quiver of a string could communicate sadness, longing, or quiet reflection. A rapid staccato rhythm might express excitement, urgency, or determination. This subtlety made strings uniquely suited to storytelling that was both personal and universal. Players could tell the history of a family, recount the journey of a tribe, or capture the emotions of a single moment, all through the careful control of vibration and resonance. As trade and migration spread humans across vast regions, the knowledge of stringed instruments also traveled. Techniques, materials, and styles crossed borders and terrains, blending into new cultures and giving rise to diverse forms of stringed instruments. Some used longer strings for deep, resonant tones. Others preferred shorter, higher-pitched strings. Plant fibers, animal gut, silk, and other materials were adapted to local environments, each affecting the sound and expressive potential. Despite these variations, the underlying principle remained the same. Strings carried stories, emotions, and knowledge through vibration. Even in moments of hardship, strings provided solace. When communities faced scarcity, conflict, or separation, the plucking of strings could soothe despair and bring focus. In quiet moments at dusk, a single melody could calm restless children, ease the labor of daily work, or create a sense of togetherness when words failed. The sound of strings reminded early humans that beauty and meaning existed even amid struggle, and that emotion could be conveyed without violence, argument, or power. In these moments, the string's delicate voice carried profound significance. Over millennia, the techniques of playing, tuning, and crafting string instruments became more sophisticated. Early humans discovered how to control tension, resonance, and vibration to produce consistent tones. They experimented with frets, bridges, and tuning devices, each addition increasing the range of expression. Music, now capable of greater subtlety and narrative complexity, became intertwined with ceremonies, work, leisure, and storytelling. Strings were no longer merely instruments. They were companions in the creation of culture and identity, shaping human experience in ways both tangible and intangible. The portability of early string instruments meant they could accompany travelers, hunters, and nomadic communities. A small, delicate instrument could be carried across mountains, deserts, or rivers, bringing sound to remote places and allowing stories to travel along with it. In every environment, strings adapted and evolved, reflecting the resourcefulness and creativity of human beings. These instruments became threads linking people across distance and time. Even today, the legacy of these early stringed instruments remains evident. Modern violins, guitars, harps, and zithers all descend from the principles discovered by humans thousands of years ago. Tension fibers, resonant bodies, and the capacity to convey emotion through controlled vibration. The gentle whisper of strings continues to communicate the same human truths: longing, joy, grief, hope, and memory. Each pluck, stroke, or bow resonates not just with sound, but with the weight of countless stories passed through generations. The strings that once carried tales of migration, harvests, and quiet griefs remind us that music is a bridge between the past and present. They demonstrate how humans have always sought to make invisible experience tangible, to give voice to the internal world, and to share it with others. They are a testament to creativity, patience, and the enduring power of storytelling. When a string vibrates, it carries not just a note but a whisper of humanity itself, a reminder that even in fragility lies profound strength, and in small, delicate objects, the vast weight of history can reside. In reflecting on the journey of strings, one sees a story of intimacy, experimentation, and expression. They reveal the earliest human recognition that sound could be shaped, controlled, and used to communicate complex feelings. Strings were not instruments of noise. They were instruments of connection. They allowed individuals to touch each other's hearts without words, to transmit stories across generations, and to preserve the subtle nuances of human life in a way that would endure long after voices and faces had disappeared. They were the whispers of the human spirit, vibrating gently yet persistently through time and space, echoing the experiences, emotions, and dreams of those who came before. Even in silence, the string story lives. The memory of the first pluck, the first resonance, the first melody that captured emotion without words continues to resonate in every stringed instrument ever made. This delicate history reminds us that creativity is as old as humanity, that the impulse to communicate and record our lives is innate, and that even the smallest vibrations can carry the weight of entire worlds. Early humans understood, perhaps instinctively, that through strings they could make invisible experience audible, could capture fleeting emotions, and could preserve memory across time. These lessons remain relevant today, as the same principle animates musicians, storytellers, and listeners across cultures and continents. Long before the first strings were plucked or the first flutes filled the air with breath, humans discovered that the world itself could sing. Stones, logs, and pieces of wood, untouched by human shaping, resonated when struck. A fallen branch could produce a hollow thump, a river-smoothed stone could ring when tapped, and hollowed logs could carry a deep tone across miles of forest. Early humans, always curious and attuned to their surroundings, began to experiment with these natural sounds. They discovered that by striking, tapping, or scraping, the world could become a canvas for musical expression. This realization, simple as it may seem, was revolutionary. In every rock, every tree, every hollowed-out cavity, there was potential for melody, rhythm, and resonance. The earliest instruments made from stone and wood were shaped less by precise construction than by careful observation and patience. A large stone might be struck with a smaller one, producing a note that was deeper or lighter depending on the size, density, and angle of contact. Some stones, smoothed by river currents, produced clear ringing tones. Others produced dull, percussive thumps. Wooden planks or logs, particularly those hollowed by natural decay or fire, could be struck to produce rhythmic beats that carried through the air. Early humans noticed that different woods, with their varying densities and lengths, produced distinct tones. Hardwoods offered bright, sharp notes, while softer woods created deeper, warmer sounds. These discoveries led to experimentation, and gradually, humans began to assemble these natural materials into instruments designed specifically to produce certain pitches or timbres. Because these instruments were crafted from materials already imbued with the character of the land, each culture's soundscape was unique. A tribe living near mountains might use large, dense stones to create low, reverberating tones that echoed across valleys, while those in forested regions might rely on hollow logs, planks, and tree stumps to produce percussive melodies that mingled with the sounds of wind and leaves. The environment was both teacher and collaborator. Its materials, its acoustics, and its inherent resonance shaped the music that could be created. In this way, music became inseparable from place, and each community developed a sound that reflected the land itself. These sonic signatures told stories of geography, climate, and lifestyle, so that a traveler from a distant region could, in listening, perceive the land from which the music had emerged. Stone and wood instruments were used in multiple facets of early life. They marked ceremonial occasions, coordinated labor, and created spaces for storytelling and reflection. In some communities, large stone slabs were struck during rituals to call spirits or mark seasonal changes, their vibrations thought to carry intention into the unseen world. Hollow logs could be used to signal distances, warn of danger, or celebrate successful hunts. Planks of wood, struck rhythmically, could guide communal work, helping groups move together in synchrony during activities such as pounding grain, transporting water, or building shelters. The integration of sound into daily life blurred the line between functionality and expression. Every tone had purpose, and every rhythm held meaning. Experimentation with tuning and resonance gradually emerged. Early humans learned that striking stones of different sizes produced varying pitches, and that arranging these stones in specific sequences could create simple scales or melodies. Hollowed logs of varying lengths could be suspended or positioned on supports to amplify their natural resonance. Some cultures began to carve grooves or indentations to subtly control the tone, while others stacked stones in sequences that allowed for more complex melodic possibilities. These innovations were not merely aesthetic. They reflected a deep understanding of physics, vibration, and acoustics, derived entirely from observation, trial, and careful listening. Humans were, in effect, early acousticians, uncovering the principles of sound long before they were formally studied. The sounds produced by stone and wood instruments had a profound impact on the emotional and social lives of early humans. Their tones could be gentle or commanding, meditative or invigorating. The deep hum of a resonant stone slab could instill calm and focus, while the sharp knock of a wooden plank might incite excitement or urgency. Communities recognized the power of these sounds to influence mood, behavior, and cohesion. In moments of collective ritual, the beating of wooden logs and the ringing of stone could unite participants, synchronizing heartbeats and breath, creating a shared sense of identity. Sound became a means of reinforcing social bonds, a sonic thread weaving together the lives of individuals into a cohesive group. Stone and wood instruments also carried cultural memory. Just as early humans painted stories on cave walls or carved symbols into objects, they encoded knowledge, values, and history in their instruments. Specific sequences of strikes or patterns could signal stories of migration, conflict, abundance, or loss. Over time, these patterns were learned, practiced, and transmitted from generation to generation. The instruments themselves, made from durable materials, often survived for centuries, preserving a tangible link to the past. A stone xylophone or a set of hollowed logs could carry echoes of ancestors' lives, ensuring continuity and cultural cohesion. Sound, in this sense, became a repository of memory, holding histories that could be heard and felt even in the absence of writing. Communities discovered that combining stone and wood instruments allowed for increasingly complex compositions. One individual might strike a series of tuned stones to create a melodic foundation, while another layered rhythmic patterns using hollowed logs or wooden planks. The interplay between timbre, pitch, and rhythm produced textures that could evoke narrative, emotion, and landscape. Early humans recognized that collaboration expanded expressive possibilities, turning individual instruments into orchestras of sound long before formal musical ensembles existed. These group performances fostered cooperation, coordination, and shared creativity, reinforcing the social function of music while deepening its emotional resonance. Sound created by these instruments was not limited to entertainment or ritual. It had practical applications as well. Large stones could carry signals across great distances, alerting communities to approaching animals, changing weather, or neighboring groups. Hollow logs could amplify the sound of a call or warning, projecting it through dense forest or across open plains. Even subtle adjustments, placing a log on a specific surface or striking a stone with a particular implement, could change how far the sound traveled or how it was perceived. In this way, early humans developed an intimate understanding of acoustics and environmental resonance, using their instruments as tools to manipulate space, perception, and communication. The spiritual dimension of stone and wood instruments cannot be overstated. Many cultures believed that these objects possessed inherent vitality. A stone was not merely inert, a log not merely dead wood. When struck, they spoke in ways that connected the human to the natural and supernatural worlds. Rituals often involved specific sequences of strikes, tuned to invoke protection, fertility, or healing. Some instruments were treated as sacred objects, played only by designated individuals, or during particular times. The sounds they produced were thought to carry intention beyond the physical plane, reaching ancestors, spirits, or deities. Music, in this sense, was a bridge between the material and the spiritual, and stone and wood instruments were among its earliest vehicles. Crafting these instruments was both a technical and spiritual endeavor. Selecting the right material required understanding the density, grain, and natural resonance of wood, or the composition and surface of stone. Shaping and hollowing had to be precise enough to produce desirable tones without compromising the object's integrity. The process demanded patience, observation, and intuition. Often, the act of creating the instrument was itself a ritual, a practice in mindfulness, skill, and respect for the materials. The resulting instrument was imbued with layers of meaning. It carried the life of the materials, the intent of the maker, and the potential to produce stories through sound. Over generations, early humans developed increasingly sophisticated techniques. Stones could be carved, grooved, or arranged in scales. Wooden logs might be hollowed, split, and suspended to enhance resonance. Combinations of stone and wood allowed for polyphonic textures, layering melodies and rhythms in ways that mirrored the complexity of human experience. These innovations were not driven by formal theory, but by experimentation, careful listening, and an intuitive understanding of vibration. Each generation built upon the discoveries of the previous, creating instruments that were both reflections of the land and extensions of human creativity. Stone and wood instruments also shaped the ways humans interacted with their environment. Playing these instruments encouraged attentiveness to acoustics, to how sound traveled across surfaces, bounced off hills, or resonated in hollow spaces. Musicians learned to select locations, caves, riverbanks, clearings that enhanced sound, amplifying tones or producing natural echoes. The environment became a partner in musical creation, shaping the instrument's voice as much as the player did. In this way, sound making reinforced observation skills, environmental awareness, and a deep connection to place, weaving music into the very fabric of human life. These instruments influenced social structures as well. Certain individuals became skilled players, their ability to produce precise tones or complex rhythms earning respect and status within the community. They guided rituals, coordinated labor, or entertained and educated listeners. Training a musician required time, mentorship, and attentive listening, creating lines of transmission that preserved knowledge and technique. In this way, stone and wood instruments were not only cultural artifacts but instruments of education, social cohesion, and leadership, shaping how communities organized, learned, and expressed themselves. The emotional power of stone and wood instruments was profound. A resonant stone could evoke awe, grounding listeners in the majesty of the landscape. A hollow log struck with precision could produce rhythms that quickened the heart or eased the mind. Repetition, variation, and subtle change in tone or rhythm allowed musicians to communicate complex feelings without words. Music became a shared emotional language, capable of conveying sorrow, joy, anticipation, or reflection. In moments of celebration, grief, or labor, these instruments united individuals in shared experience, producing a sense of collective identity and continuity. As humans migrated, instruments evolved, reflecting the diversity of environments they encountered. A volcanic region might inspire instruments with dense stones that produced low, echoing tones, while a lush forest might favor resonant hollow logs that blended with wind and foliage. Materials, climate, and geography influenced design, sound, and technique. Despite this diversity, the underlying principle remained. The instruments were extensions of the land, shaped by and shaping human interaction with the natural world. Every tone told a story of place, culture, and human ingenuity. Even in isolation, stone and wood instruments carried the voice of their culture. A traveler on a distant plain could hear the sound of familiar rhythms or melodies, recognizing the origins of the instruments even before encountering the people who played them. These instruments encoded identity, history, and emotional memory. They were portable archives of culture, allowing knowledge and tradition to move across space and time. In this sense, early instruments were both practical and symbolic, reaching communities and generations. Stone and wood instruments survived because of their durability. Unlike delicate flutes or fragile string instruments, a carved stone or a well-dried log could endure for decades or centuries. They became repositories of sound, memory, and ritual, connecting present communities with their ancestors. Playing an ancient instrument linked the musician not only to tradition but to the land itself, reinforcing continuity and cultural resilience. Through sound, humans were able to preserve knowledge, express emotion, and maintain identity even in times of change or hardship. 2. The legacy of stone and wood instruments is evident even today. Modern percussion instruments, Malay instruments, and resonant wooden boards trace their lineage back to these earliest discoveries. The principle of resonance, amplification, and environmental interaction continues to guide instrument makers, composers, and musicians. The first instruments shaped from the natural world remind us that music is inseparable from observation, creativity, and connection. They teach that sound is not only a human invention, but also a discovery of the latent voices in the world around us. Through stone and wood, early humans realized that the world itself could speak. That insight shaped culture, ritual, and social organization for millennia. Striking stones, tapping logs, and striking planks was more than entertainment. It was a dialogue with the land, a communication with spirits, and a record of human life. It fostered collaboration, creativity, and attentiveness, embedding music deeply into the human experience. The melodies produced were not arbitrary. They were reflections of place, identity, and the deep interplay between humans and their environment. Even today, when we play a wooden xylophone, a marimba, or a lithophone, we echo the discoveries of those early people who first recognized the potential of stone and wood. Every strike, every resonant tone, every vibration carries within it the memory of human ingenuity, connection to the land, and the enduring desire to create stories from sound. Stone and wood, alive with resonance, continue to whisper across the centuries, reminding us that music is as old as humanity itself, and that the world has always had a voice for those who listen. Long before humans developed written language, before cities and governments, before science and medicine were codified, music held a power that transcended the physical. The earliest humans discovered that sound was more than vibration. It could move the mind, body, and spirit in ways that were tangible yet mysterious. In many early societies, instruments were not merely tools for entertainment or ritual. They were conduits for magic, medicine, and connection with forces beyond human understanding. Every note, every rhythm, every melody carried meaning. It was a language older than writing, older than speech itself, encoded in vibration and resonance, capable of influencing human emotion, behavior, and perception. The first musicians were not just performers. They were healers, shamans, mediators, and keepers of ancient knowledge. Their music could summon spirits, calm storms, or heal the sick. It could shift moods, influence social cohesion, and carry the collective memory of entire communities. The power of music in early societies was rooted in the belief that the natural and spiritual worlds were interconnected. Humans were not separate from nature. They were part of it, and the sounds they produced were understood to communicate with the invisible forces around them. A drum beat, steady and deep, could mimic the heartbeat of the earth, invoking protection or strength. A flute, airy and high-pitched, could call forth winds, invite rain, or communicate with spirits of the sky. String instruments, delicate and precise, could convey emotions, tell stories of ancestors, or transmit healing intentions. Music was a bridge between humans and the larger cosmos, a means to engage with the unknown through sound. Instruments were often imbued with symbolic power. Drums were sometimes carved with markings or symbols representing deities, ancestors, or natural forces. Flutes might be made from sacred materials, bones, reeds, or wood from specific trees, chosen for their perceived spiritual resonance. Strings were carefully selected, tuned, and treated to enhance their voice and effectiveness. The construction of an instrument was itself a ritual, reflecting intention, reverence, and an understanding that the sound produced would carry energy capable of influencing the world. To strike, pluck, or blow an instrument was not merely to create sound. It was to channel intention into a form that could affect both seen and unseen realms. Healing was one of the most profound applications of music in these societies. Early humans observed that sound could calm agitation, ease pain, and shift emotional states. A shaman might use rhythmic drumming to induce trance, allowing a patient to enter a state where psychological or spiritual healing could occur. Flutes or stringed instruments could provide soothing tones that slowed the heart rate, relaxed muscles, or calmed the mind. Vibrations from instruments could be applied directly to the body, sometimes by placing the instrument near the patient or allowing the sound waves to wash over them. The principles behind these practices were intuitive. Sound affects the nervous system, and its patterns can influence emotion and physiology. In early societies, this understanding was expressed as both medicine and magic. Music also played a crucial role in protection and ritual. Communities believed that certain sounds could ward off evil spirits, protect hunters or travelers, and maintain harmony between humans and the natural world. Drums might be struck at dawn or dusk to signal safety or to invite benevolent forces into the village. Bells, stones, and other percussive instruments were used to dispel negative energy or mark transitions in daily life. Melodies were sometimes accompanied by chants, dances, or gestures that amplified the perceived magical effect of the music. Through these practices, music was a tool not only of expression, but of environmental and spiritual management, guiding communities in alignment with the rhythms of life. Ceremonies often combined multiple instruments to enhance their effect. A healing ritual might include the steady pulse of a drum, the ethereal tones of a flute, and the resonant vibrations of a stringed instrument. Each layer of sound contributed to a holistic sensory experience, engaging the listener on emotional, cognitive, and physical levels. The complexity of these musical arrangements mirrored the understanding that healing, protection, and magic required coordination, intention, and attention to subtle energies. Musicians and shamans became experts in crafting these soundscapes, learning which combinations of tones, rhythms, and patterns produced specific effects. The belief in music as a form of magic was not limited to healing. In many cultures, music was thought to influence weather, agriculture, and animal behavior. Certain rhythms and melodies could summon rain, encourage growth, or calm storms. Songs accompanied planting, harvest, and hunting, embedding practical knowledge into musical practice. Hunters might play instruments to attract or calm animals, while farmers used rhythms to coordinate labor and maintain the harmony of agricultural cycles. Music was both functional and symbolic, connecting human activity to natural processes and imbuing work with spiritual meaning. Storytelling and memory were also deeply intertwined with music. Melodies could carry historical knowledge, genealogies, and lessons of morality. A healer or musician might sing or play sequences of notes that encoded ancestral stories, preserving culture and identity in the absence of written language. These songs were more than entertainment. They were repositories of collective wisdom, ensuring that important lessons, rituals, and experiences were transmitted across generations. Music became a medium through which communities remembered their past, understood the present, and prepared for the future. The effects of music on emotion were keenly observed. Certain tones could instill courage, while others could inspire reflection or sorrow. A fast, repetitive drum pattern could excite a crowd, elevate adrenaline, and prepare warriors for battle. A slow, melodic sequence from a string or flute could lull listeners into calmness or meditation, easing anxiety and facilitating introspection. Musicians became adept at manipulating sound to evoke specific emotional responses, understanding intuitively that music could influence mood, perception, and behavior. In this sense, early music was an early form of psychology. employing the power of sound to shape human experience. The role of the musician was both social and spiritual. Musicians were often among the most respected members of the community, entrusted with knowledge of melodies, rhythms, and techniques capable of invoking desired effects. They taught apprentices, preserving their knowledge and ensuring continuity across generations. Their expertise extended beyond skillful playing. It required understanding the symbolic, emotional, and energetic properties of instruments and sounds. Musicians acted as mediators, connecting humans with ancestors, spirits, or natural forces. Their work required intuition, sensitivity, and awareness, blending artistry with ritual, skill with intention. Music's power extended to communal cohesion. Collective rituals, dances, and ceremonies used music to synchronize action and intention. When multiple musicians played together, or when drums, flutes, and strings combined in harmony, participants often entered a shared psychological state. Heart rates aligned, movements became coordinated, and a sense of unity prevailed. Music thus functioned as a social glue, reinforcing bonds, transmitting cultural norms, and creating collective identity. It ensured that knowledge, emotion, and ritual were not isolated to individuals but shared experiences that connected communities across time and space. Across continents and disparate cultures, humans independently discovered that sound could heal, protect, and inspire. Drums, flutes, strings, and percussive instruments all became vehicles for intention. Communities might differ in materials or style, but the principles were similar. Controlled vibration could influence mind, body, and spirit. This convergence points to an intuitive understanding of sound's intrinsic power, a recognition that music is not merely decorative, but functional, capable of shaping human experience, health, and social life. The relationship between music and medicine was particularly significant. Early humans observed that music could alleviate discomfort, reduce stress, and even influence recovery. Patients who listened to melodic sequences often showed calmer breathing, reduced agitation, and improved emotional states. Sound could be integrated into therapies, combining vibration, rhythm, and melody to influence both physiological and psychological processes. Music became part of a holistic approach to wellness, complementing herbs, rituals, and spiritual practices. In these societies, medicine was inseparable from music, and healing was understood as a complex interplay of body, mind, and spirit mediated through sound. In addition to healing individuals, music was employed to maintain environmental balance. Certain melodies or rhythms were believed to appease or attract spirits associated with natural elements. Rainmakers, for example, might perform intricate sequences on drums or flutes to encourage rainfall during droughts. Wind, fire, and animal behavior could be influenced through the careful application of musical intention. These practices reflect a worldview in which humans and nature were deeply interdependent, and where music served as a tool for negotiating and harmonizing that relationship. Every note carried significance, not merely for humans, but for the broader environment in which they lived. The symbolism embedded in music also shaped societal norms and ethics. Songs could teach, instruct, or warn. The melodies accompanying rituals or communal activities conveyed moral lessons, encouraged cooperation, or reinforced social hierarchies. Music was not a passive experience. It was interactive, guiding thought, action, and behavior. In ceremonies, the correct sequence of notes or rhythm could invoke desired outcomes, demonstrating the practical as well as the symbolic power of sound. Musicians in these contexts were not entertainers, but agents of social and spiritual influence. As instruments evolved, so did their applications. Drums became more elaborate, incorporating multiple layers of rhythm and timbre to amplify their magical or medicinal effects. Flutes were carved with precision to produce specific tonal qualities believed to resonate with particular spirits or energies. Strings were tuned to convey emotional nuance or to reinforce ritual significance. The integration of multiple instruments created complex soundscapes, each carefully crafted to achieve desired effects, whether to heal, to protect, or to enhance communal experience. The artistry of composition became inseparable from the functional and symbolic purposes of music. Participation in musical ritual extended beyond trained musicians. Community members often joined in response, clapping, stamping, or chanting, amplifying the energetic and emotional impact of the performance. Collective involvement strengthened social cohesion, deepened the spiritual efficacy of the music, and ensured that the knowledge embedded in melodies and rhythms was widely transmitted. Music became a shared language, capable of shaping not only individual experience but the collective state of a community. The interplay between musician, listener, and environment reflected an understanding of human psychology and physiology long before formal science would explain these effects. In early societies, the line between magic and medicine was blurred. Healing rituals often incorporated symbolic gestures, recitations, and the playing of instruments. Music functioned simultaneously as a therapeutic tool, a spiritual invocation, and a conduit for intention. This drumming patterns could alter consciousness, facilitating healing visions or meditative states. Melodic sequences could ease pain, calm fear, or promote emotional release. Every sound had purpose. Every vibration carried meaning. Music was medicine, magic, and message, woven together into a holistic practice of life. The power of music as magic and medicine persisted across generations. Skills, techniques, and sequences were carefully taught, passed from master to apprentice, and encoded in tradition. Instruments themselves often carried spiritual significance. Some were considered living objects, their resonance imbued with the wisdom and energy of ancestors. Playing an instrument was therefore a form of communication with both the living and the dead, with nature and with unseen forces. Every note was a connection, every rhythm a channel through which life, energy, and intention could flow. Even today, echoes of these practices remain. Music continues to affect emotion, physiology, and behavior, whether in therapy, meditation, or communal celebration. Contemporary knowledge about rhythm, vibration, and resonance confirms what early humans intuited. Sound is a powerful agent of change, capable of influencing mind, body, and spirit. The earliest instruments played with intention were not just music. They were tools of life, connection, and transformation, demonstrating the timeless intersection of art, medicine, and magic. Through music, early societies discovered that sound is a language older than writing, capable of conveying meaning, intention, and energy across generations. Instruments were conduits of healing, protection, and insight, providing ways to engage with the physical, spiritual, and social worlds. Every note, every rhythm, every melody carried purpose. Music was not an accessory to life. It was an essential element of human experience, a bridge to the unseen, a medicine for the body, and a magic that connected communities with each other and with the world around them. In this way, the earliest humans understood the profound truth that sound, when shaped with intention, can shape life itself. Long before theaters, concert halls, or formal orchestras existed, humans discovered the profound joy of gathering to create and experience music together. In the earliest societies, music was not just an individual expression. It was inherently communal, a shared ritual that bound people through sound, rhythm, and vibration. These gatherings were the first concerts, though they were unlike anything we might imagine today. There were no programs, no tickets, no printed scores. Instead, these events arose from necessity, curiosity, and the human desire for connection. Communities assembled to celebrate, mourn, heal, or communicate, and the music they produced was both an expression of emotion and a means of maintaining social cohesion. The first concerts were living, breathing events shaped by environment, participants, instruments, and intention. Every note, rhythm, and melody was improvised yet purposeful, echoing with meanings that resonated across the group and the surrounding world. The instruments used in these early gatherings varied widely. Drums, hollow logs, and wooden planks provided rhythm, flutes, reeds, and primitive whistles added melody, and strings, whether from gut, plant fiber, or sinew, contributed subtle harmonic layers. Stones could be struck to create percussive tones, while shells or hollow gourds amplified vibrations, carrying sound across open spaces. The diversity of instruments reflected the diversity of the natural world, and the combination of sounds was shaped as much by what materials were available as by cultural preference. Yet despite this variety, the underlying principle was consistent. When humans gathered, sound could unify, communicate, and elevate experience beyond the mundane. The first concerts were an organic collaboration between people, instruments, and the environment. These gatherings often served multiple purposes. In some cases, they were celebratory, marking important events such as harvests, successful hunts, births, or victories. The act of creating music together reinforced community bonds, allowing individuals to participate in shared joy and ritual. In other instances, concerts were ceremonial, performed to honor ancestors, appease spirits, or seek protection and guidance. The communal aspect of the music amplified its spiritual and emotional power, creating a sense that the group, united through rhythm and melody, could influence both the physical and unseen worlds. Music in this context was a form of collective intention, where every participant contributed energy, focus, and presence to the creation of a shared sonic reality. The physical environment played a crucial role in shaping these early concerts. Caves, cliff faces, and hollowed-out trees provided natural acoustics that amplified sound, creating reverberation and resonance that enhanced the emotional impact. Open plains allowed rhythms and melodies to travel across long distances, carrying messages or signaling communal gatherings. Rivers, waterfalls, and winds added natural accompaniment, blending with human-created sounds in an organic symphony. Early humans were acutely aware of how location influenced music, intuitively arranging their instruments and performers to maximize impact. In this way, the first concerts were not only social events but experiments in acoustics, spatial awareness, and environmental interaction. Participation in these gatherings was often inclusive, though some roles were specialized. Skilled musicians, shamans, or elders might guide the performance, playing complex rhythms, melodies, or sequences of notes. Others joined in collective chanting, clapping, or simple instrument playing, contributing to the overall texture and energy. Even those who did not play were engaged through movement, dance, or attentive listening. The interplay between individuals created a dynamic, living musical experience where improvisation and responsiveness were essential. Every participant influenced the performance, and the music evolved in real time, shaped by the reactions and interactions of the community. Rhythm was a central element in these early concerts. The steady pulse of drums or striking of logs aligned bodies and hearts, creating synchronization among participants. This synchronization was more than aesthetic. It had physiological and psychological effects, inducing heightened focus, excitement, or trance-like states. People became attuned to one another, moving and breathing together, experiencing a collective emotional resonance. The communal pulse reinforced unity, strengthening social bonds, and creating a shared sense of identity. Rhythm, more than melody or harmony, served as the backbone of these gatherings, connecting individuals through the shared experience of time and vibration. Melody and tone added layers of meaning and emotional depth. Flutes, whistles, and early stringed instruments produced sounds that could convey subtle nuances of emotion, from sorrow and longing to joy and triumph. Skilled players manipulated pitch, volume, and timbre to guide the emotional arc of the gathering. Patterns of call and response emerged, where one musician's phrase was echoed or answered by another, creating dialogue within the performance. These interactions fostered attentiveness, creativity, and a sense of co-creation. Music became a living conversation, a medium for shared expression that transcended spoken language and tapped directly into human emotion. Improvisation was fundamental to the first concerts. Without standardized notation or formal training, musicians relied on intuition, memory, and cultural patterns to guide their playing. Variations in rhythm, tempo, or melody were embraced as natural, allowing the music to respond to the energy of the participants, the environment, and the moment. This improvisational quality ensured that each gathering was unique, reflecting the particular dynamics of the group and the context in which it occurred. Yet even in spontaneity, early humans adhered to subtle structures. Repeated motifs, call and response sequences, and rhythmic cycles created cohesion and allowed participants to follow and contribute meaningfully. The social and cultural significance of these gatherings cannot be overstated. Music served as a repository for memory, history, and tradition. Songs and rhythms encoded stories of ancestors, migrations, hunts, and seasonal cycles. Through repeated performance, these traditions were reinforced and knowledge was transmitted across generations. Participation in concerts was both entertainment and education, connecting young members of the community with elders, teaching cultural values, social norms, and practical knowledge. Music, therefore, was a vessel for cultural continuity, preserving identity, and ensuring the survival of communal wisdom. Early concerts also had spiritual dimensions. Music was believed to facilitate communication with ancestors, spirits, or deities. The combination of rhythm, melody, and ritual created a bridge between the human and the supernatural. In some societies, the collective energy generated by group performance was thought to amplify intention, whether for protection, healing, or blessing. Moabit shamans and ritual specialists guided these performances, using instruments and vocalizations to channel energy and focus the group's attention. Participants often experienced altered states of consciousness, entering trance or meditative states that allowed for spiritual insight, healing, or emotional catharsis. Music was not merely entertainment. It was a tool for transformation and connection with forces beyond the immediate material world. The emotional impact of these gatherings was profound. Music provided a safe space for expression, release, and shared experience. Participants could explore a range of feelings: joy, grief, fear, hope, in a structured, communal environment. Drums might accelerate to generate excitement or urgency. Flutes might rise to convey triumph or longing, and strings could provide gentle undertones of reflection or consolation. The interplay of instruments, combined with communal participation, produced complex emotional landscapes, allowing humans to process and communicate experiences that might otherwise remain unspoken. Music became a mirror of the community's collective psyche, reflecting both individual and group emotion. Environmental cues often guided the timing and structure of these concerts. The rising and setting of the sun, seasonal changes, animal migrations, or celestial events influenced when and how gatherings occurred. Music was integrated into natural cycles, reinforcing the connection between humans and their surroundings. Performances at dawn or dusk, near rivers or atop hills, were not arbitrary. They harnessed natural acoustics and imbued the music with additional symbolic and emotional significance. The landscape itself became part of the performance, shaping resonance, echo, and the movement of participants. The first concerts were also exercises in coordination and collaboration. Musicians and participants had to listen attentively to one another, adjusting timing, intensity, and melody to maintain coherence. This fostered skills of empathy, anticipation, and responsiveness. Group cohesion was essential. The music depended on cooperation as much as skill. Through these collective efforts, humans learned how sound could unify action, focus attention, and cultivate social harmony. Music, in this sense, was both a practical and symbolic practice, reinforcing the principles of cooperation, shared responsibility, and cultural participation. Over time, the repertoire of early concerts expanded. Patterns, motifs, and sequences were memorized, repeated, and varied. Traditions developed around specific types of gatherings, rituals, celebrations, labor coordination, or healing ceremonies. These musical frameworks provided continuity, while allowing for creativity and adaptation. Participation became a way to engage with culture actively, contributing to the ongoing evolution of musical expression. Music was simultaneously conservative, preserving established forms, innovative, responding to the dynamics of individual performers and the needs of the community. The legacy of these first concerts is still evident today. Modern music ensembles, orchestras, bands, and communal performances echo the principles discovered thousands of years ago. The power of collective sound, the role of rhythm in unifying participants, the emotional and spiritual impact of coordinated performance, and the integration of environment into musical experience. Even contemporary improvisation, jam sessions, and collaborative music making reflect the same intuitive understanding that early humans possessed. That music is strongest when shared, responsive, and alive in the moment. The first concerts also highlight the universality of musical experience. Across continents and cultures, humans independently discovered that collective sound could evoke emotion, convey meaning, and enhance cohesion. Whether striking drums in Africa, plucking strings in Asia, or blowing flutes in Europe, early humans recognized that music could create a shared space of connection, ritual, and communication. The similarities in approach suggest that the impulse to gather, to make music together, and to harness sound for emotional, social, and spiritual purposes is fundamental to the human experience. These gatherings were more than the sum of individual performances. They created emergent experiences where the combination of instruments, voices, movement, and environment produced something greater than the participants alone could achieve. Listeners and performers alike experienced a sense of unity and transcendence, a shared consciousness mediated through sound. This collective dimension reinforced social bonds, established traditions, and created shared memory. Music was a social glue, a spiritual tool, and a form of cultural preservation all in one, but participation in these early concerts was active. Audiences were not passive. They clapped, stamped, chanted, or danced in response to the music. Their movement and energy influenced the performance, creating feedback loops that shaped tempo, dynamics, and intensity. Music became a co-creative process, involving both performers and participants. The energy generated in these gatherings had emotional, social, and spiritual impact, reinforcing the importance of communal engagement in early musical life. These interactions laid the foundation for all later musical performance, from ritual ensembles to modern concert halls. Even the simplest gatherings carried layers of meaning. A rhythmic sequence might encode a story, a melodic line could honor ancestors, and the spatial arrangement of performers could symbolize cosmological principles. Every element was intentional, whether consciously or intuitively, and contributed to the transformative power of the experience. Music was not separate from life. It was embedded in social structure, environment, ritual, and emotion. The first concerts demonstrated the integrated nature of early human culture, showing how sound could simultaneously entertain, instruct, heal, and unite. The first concerts were also dynamic experiments in sound. Musicians learned through trial and observation how multiple instruments interacted, how spatial placement influenced resonance, and how tempo and dynamics affected emotion. Patterns emerged, guiding future performances while allowing room for improvisation and responsiveness. This iterative process created a body of collective knowledge about sound, performance, and communal experience. Early concerts were laboratories of human creativity, insight, and emotional intelligence, long before music theory or formal composition existed. In essence, the first concerts represented the recognition that music is a communal language, capable of communicating across individuals, generations, and even the physical and spiritual worlds. Through rhythm, melody, harmony, and resonance, Early humans discovered a medium for connection, expression, and transformation. Every note carried intention, every rhythm shaped collective experience, and every performance reinforced the bonds between people, environment, and the unseen world. Pew.